You suck. Okay, Sonic Unleashed is like my second favourite Sonic game of all time, but at the same time I also think this is one of the worst video games I've ever played. I've got a very love-hate relationship with this thing. It's got so much I like, but also so much I think is incredibly stupid. In fact, this is one of the only Sonic games I can truly call fundamentally flawed. Sonic 06, terrible, but not because of the base ideas of what the game was planned to be. That all came down to the execution and it being rushed. Same with Lost World Wii U. In my opinion, this is the single most boring Sonic game ever made. But that wasn't down to the ideas, that was down to how they only really dipped their pinky toe into any of the things they planned. Sonic Unleashed though? Oh my god, in terms of its designs and concepts, this game has so many core problems that, trust me, I'm gonna go into grave detail about. But to fully understand where I'm coming from, how about a little history lesson? Let's go all the way back to the dark era of Sonic, where the franchise was in a spot. Our last game was fuck, and then before that was shit. I think we could all agree that Sonic wasn't in its best shape at the time, and the franchise really needed that next big game to put it back on its feet. Fans were fiending for that next release, wondering where the franchise would go after back-to-back misses. Come 2008, there were quite a few leaks surrounding Sonic Unleashed, including pictures of the intro cutscene and really choppy and unfinished gameplay for the stage Savannah Citadel. Then months later, the official E3 trailer dropped with equally as choppy gameplay, but a much more finished looking cutscene showing the big twist of Sonic transforming into you-know-what. Towards the end of the trailer, gameplay was shown for this new Sonic form, and it was such a sharp contrast from all of the Sonic gameplay we've seen up until this point. He was whacking the shit out of these groups of enemies DMC or God of War style, and while it did look really interesting, it was also mad confusing. I can't speak from my experience since I was about 3 years old at the time, but a lot of fans were so puzzled it ended up feeling like hate for what was being shown off. But like, can you really blame them? Remember, this is post Sonic 06, so most people were just looking for something that was so simple that even Sonic Team couldn't mess it up again. Anyways, more and more trailers would release over time showing off more about the game, with my personal favourite being the mysterious sightings one. This was shot like a horror news report where real locations were filmed at night showing the werewolf being sighted like this world's version of Bigfoot. It was incredibly unique, but also really funny because it's such a giant difference in tone compared to the goofiness of the actual game. Eventually, Unleashed was revealed to release late 2008 on damn near everything: PS3, PS2, Wii, Xbox, even a mobile version. I'm surprised the DS didn't get a surprise release. Sega was going all in for this game in a way that nobody had seen before. Fans were rightfully excited, critics wanted to dig in and see what they cooked up, everyone wanted their hands on this thing. But then it released.
There's one thing you should know about Sonic Unleashed before spending your hard-earned money on it. It's a big piece of garbage. Now, I have a theory when it comes to Sonic games. Someone at Sega hates the Hedgehog with all his might, and he's going about trying to sabotage the franchise with these awful games.
Unfortunately, I'm having a hard time figuring out exactly who this game is for. If you're looking for a hedgehog werewolfy clone of a brawling game, some kind of bad implementation of RPG and adventures, a game that's going to insult your intelligence, it's going to make you feel bad, it's going to wish, oh god, it were 1992 again. I guess, if that, then this is the game for you.
Sonic the Werehog makes Biggs the Cat look like an endearing character. Yeah, it's that bad.
Was everyone miserable in the 2000s? Sonic Unleashed's initial reception was possibly one of the harshest humiliation rituals in the history of gaming. Seriously, think of any big publisher, they probably dogged on Unleashed when it first dropped. And who could forget IGN? They made possibly one of the most iconic reviews in Sonic history, giving Unleashed a 4.5 out of 10. 4.5. That is lower than Sonic 06, Mighty No. 9, DMC2, Knack. Was this game bugged to oblivion? Did nothing work as intended, or was it just a bad experience overall? Yes and no. That 4.5 might as well be a 9 out of 10 and 0 out of 10 meshed into one. Sonic Unleashed is the definition of a half and half game. You have two entirely different types of gameplay, level structure, content and visuals all at the same time. Sonic Team was really ambitious with this project, but in the end it resulted in an experience that felt lopsided, and you can really feel that with the reception. The general opinion back on the release, and still to this day honestly, is that one side is drastically better than the other. Daytime good, nighttime bad, and while I agree that the night sections are the weaker part of this game, the hate was far too over exaggerated. Yes, it's got its flaws, but it also has a lot of good, and that's just true for this game as a whole. But before I get to the good and bad of Sonic Unleashed, let's just talk about something I know everyone can agree on: This story fucking slaps. I've said this before and I'll say it again, but I genuinely think that this is the best in-game Sonic story of all time, along with Sonic and the Black Knight. It's engaging, it's silly without going too over the top, it has serious moments that don't take themselves too seriously. The story as a whole manages to nail its tone perfectly, and it has a great plot on top of all of that. Everything starts off with an absolute bang. This opening cutscene is still to this day the best introduction in any Sonic game. The action is flashy without feeling overwhelming. Everything moves so smoothly and with such grand expression and exaggeration and silliness. Just look at him, it's great, and I know this cutscene probably costed a fortune to animate, but I hope that one day we really return to this style and quality. Anyways, you all know how these events play out. Eggman captures Sonic, he goes super, which looks cool as hell by the way, and then he corners Eggman inside of his freaky control room. But suddenly, boom, plot twist, Sonic's ego gets the best of him, ending up with him getting hoodwinked, allowing Eggman to get the complete upper hand and restrain him completely. Eggman then uses his weird force field thingy to suck Sonic's soul out and then drain all the Chaos Emeralds of their energy for his massive weapon that... Now we're more mature than that. This strange weapon now has immense power and fires a beam that shatters the Earth into many pieces and also awakens a mysterious beast sleeping in the Earth's core. Sonic also feels the effects of Eggman's machine, causing him to slowly transform into a monster, gaining fur, spiky teeth, losing the gloves, but somehow his shoes grow spikes along with him. Eggman sees the newfound abomination in front of him and rightfully blasts it and the Chaos Emeralds away, sending them flying back down to Earth and summoning the game's title card. And just like that, we've already got a strong ass premise. The Emeralds are out of commission, Sonic and the world are in bad shape, and the foreboding mystery of what Eggman's plan is becomes the main focus for the rest of the story. Shortly after landing, Sonic meets a new companion, Chip, and after quite a few endearing interactions, these two become the best of friends for the rest of their journey. Chip is a weird chihuahua imp thingy with brownish red fur, full-on amnesia and wings. We can't forget the wings. He's pretty energetic, but nowhere near to the level of someone like Charmy B. He just sort of exists and interacts with the world more than anything else, really. So amnesia basically causes him to act like an eager little kid, which is why I can't understand how some people hate his guts. I mean, yeah, he can be a little bit annoying at times. But he's still an endearing enough character who, while being goofy, manages to serve an important purpose later on. Other Sonic characters also appear during the main story. Tails shows up pretty early, and unfortunately in his meta-era character style he's scared as fuck and has completely forgot how to defend himself. At least here it makes more sense because he's outnumbered by things he's never fought before rather than being scared of a pre-evolved form of something he's already beaten. Like seriously, could you imagine a Blaziken being afraid of a Trico? That is exactly how this scene enforces felt. But back on track, in this game he's kind of a flat character that doesn't really develop, but that's also kind of fine because he doesn't really need to. He's basically an unpaid intern for the entire runtime. He flies us to different countries, he helps us piece together some of the mystery, and that's really all he does. Amy's also here, but she basically boils down to a cameo appearance. She has no real impact on the plot other than dancing and making Sonic really upset in one scene by calling him chopped. Last addition to the cast is Professor Pickle, and he's the group's version of Google Maps and Wikipedia meshed into one. He gets kidnapped, we save him, and he joins us along the way to help us restore everything and reveal more and more about the world's secrets as time passes. To restore the world, Sonic and Co need to visit the 7 Gaia temples scattered around the world, and on placing a Chaos Emerald back into its respective slot, it restores that continent and the power of the Emerald as well. The Gaia temples are something I really wish we got to explore like in the Wii version. These are some of the most bewildering and interesting things in the Sonic world, and actually getting to interact with them would have been really cool and played more into that sense of mystery that this game has. One of my favourite things about Unleashed is how much it focuses on world building compared to other Sonic games. The Gaia temples being on separate continents and often being the most sacred part of each culture is such a great concept for the human part of Sonic's world. Temples also leave a lot of interesting questions to be asked, like who the hell actually built these things and how on earth do they actually power up the Chaos Emeralds? It's little things like this that make me wish that one day we'll revisit these locations and flesh them out a little bit more. Anyways, the story itself has a pretty simple loop. Sonic and Chip go somewhere new, Eggman does or says something stupid.
Eggman! How'd you get here so quickly?
They beat him, restore a temple, and then rinse repeat for most of the game. It's incredibly simple but still really compelling. The goofy tone mixed with the fast pacing, decent dialogue and interesting plot makes this a very good Sonic story that remains to be one of the only Sonic games that don't skip cutscenes in. But this isn't a movie, it's a video game. We might have a pretty good story here, but is the gameplay up to par? Yes, no, yes, kinda. Brace yourselves. Okay, so remember when I said this game was a 9 out of 10 and 0 out of 10 at once? While extremely exaggerated, it's kinda true because the main gameplay is split right down the middle. Or like 70-30. During the day you play as regular Sonic, but when the sun sets you turn into his brand new form, the Werehog. The Werehog is a complete and utter detour from normal Sonic gameplay, which is probably why the reception was so bad, but I'll get to this thing later. Let's start with the more digestible side of Unleashed. I love the daytime portion to death, but I don't think it's a flawless masterpiece. Sonic Unleashed was the first 3D game in the series to use the boost formula. First introduced in the Rush games, boosting was radically different from the older forms of Sonic gameplay. Instead of directly earning your speed through momentum, you instead build up energy from rings and enemies, and upon pressing a single button you instantly reach top speed and mow down almost everything in your path. It's extremely fun, but by removing momentum you completely change a vital staple of Sonic gameplay: earning your speed. In previous games, part of the fun was memorizing the levels and optimizing how you play them so you can keep your momentum and flow going. But here, while memorization is still very important, there's less flow to your actions and it becomes more based on reaction time over anything else. The boost is so fast and comically overpowered that you spend about 90% of the time just plowing through enemies and obstacles, which in turn means that the levels have to be far more linear to suit the speed. As a game designer, making a level is already incredibly difficult, but that only gets harder when your character is moving at the speed of sound. So as a level designer, you have to throw out the concept of raw exploration, because how on earth would you actually design that? If you want to explore while going this fast, it often leads to a lot of stopping and starting, which also contributes to the most glaring issue with this half of the game. However, that doesn't mean that any of these levels are badly designed. Being linear really didn't stop them from being creative. In fact, this isn't even a hot take, and I'm sure many people will agree, but these are some of the best stages in the entire franchise. Combine that with the fact that the boost is the most exhilarating Sonic style by far, and you get some great stages that sadly are also the hardest to get into. Sonic games just kinda have this thing where they're not the most fun on their first attempt, but to me the boost, and more specifically Unleashed itself, has this the worst. Give a baby a controller and make them play Sonic 1, they'll struggle a bit but they'll get the hang of it. Give a baby a controller and make them play Sonic Adventure, they'll struggle a little bit more because of the third dimension, but they'll get it eventually. Give a baby Sonic Unleashed, the average first playthrough is going to be full of a whole lot of... But once you get past that learning stage and familiarize yourself with all the layouts of these levels, goddamn, this is the most fun Sonic game of all time. The day stages are so well designed, they mix together extremely high speed with limited platforming, and they also all use Sonic's moveset to the fullest. The moves and abilities in this game are so refined and simple, but they also have a lot more depth than most people realize. Even looking at just the jump, if you tap the button instead of holding it down, Sonic does a short hop that lets him clear small obstacles without losing speed. The normal jump works exactly how you'd expect, but one thing that's always bothered me is how awkward it feels to actually platform with it. I think it's the fact that it's not very floaty, so it doesn't give you that much time to change where you're going, but overall I think it still works fine. But you know what isn't fine? The homing attack. For some reason these doofuses decided to bind it to the exact same button as the boost, which is just why? I don't know why they just wouldn't put it on the A button like it's been for every other game in the franchise. It's just such a weird decision that makes the platforming a little more frustrating than it should be. Sonic also has the slide, which is as standard as it gets. It's snappy, it doesn't make you lose that much speed, so I really have no problems here. What's funny though is if you don't have enough speed before sliding, Sonic will get on all fours and crawl around, which is by far the most humiliating way to get around. Strangest of all, Unleashed decided to keep the foot sweep thing from Sonic 06, except here it serves basically zero purpose outside of bullying a random NPC in the hub worlds. Anyway, Sonic also has a bunch of new abilities introduced, with the first being the drift. Holding RT allows Sonic to turn around corners really smoothly as if he was a real life car, but anyone who's played this game can tell you it feels really inconsistent at times. That inconsistency is on purpose because the drift has a wind up mechanic. If you let go of boost and start drifting from wider out, you'll gradually start turning faster and tighter and be able to get around any curve. And how did I find this out? I watched a cool ass video because the game doesn't really explain this at all. Obviously you're meant to experiment and find this out yourself, which I actually like, but the issue is you have no reason to do this this because outside of a few DLC levels you won't be drifting long enough for this to become a factor. I do like the idea of the drift having a whiner, but it does make turning in certain levels, especially in the late game, a lot more frustrating. On the complete opposite side, Sonic has a new move that's far more consistent, the quick step. While running, you can press either of the shoulder buttons to quickly move Sonic to whatever side you click on. You lose zero speed when doing this, so it leads to a lot of exhilarating quick reaction sequences in many levels. I also love how it looks visually. You can feel the speed every time you step thanks to the blur effect and snappy animation. And on the topic of things I love, another aspect I think is great about Unleashed is how you unlock certain abilities as you progress. The first is another brand new ability, the Stomp. If you're in the air and then press B, Sonic will instantly slam down onto the ground. What's interesting about the Stomp compared to the one in Generations is it actually keeps some of your momentum, which is both a blessing and a curse. On one hand it's cool because you can slide out of it immediately and get going faster, but on the other hand it makes any type of precise platforming slightly harder. Another unlockable ability is the wall jump, and it's a wall jump, I've got nothing crazy to say. At times I did feel like the jump height was a bit inconsistent, but that just feels like a skill issue. The air boost is next, and I think it's by far my favourite ability. As you can tell by the name, it allows you to boost in the air, which is great because you get to keep the speed you've built up from on the ground. Before unlocking it, it was an air dash, which allowed you to travel decently far, but it was a fixed distance and it would slow you down after using it. The air boost is the opposite, it allows you to keep all of your speed, which is great for keeping the flow going. However, if you remember what I said about the homing attack, both of these things are banded to the same button, which you can tell was just pretty fucking stupid. At least the light speed dash is really fun. This is the final move you unlock in the game, and it's so much better implemented than any other Sonic game. Here it's the press of the Y button, and it's snappy, quick, responsive, and I don't think it's failed on me a single time. And that's it for Sonic's moveset in this game, and as a whole I think it does a lot more good than it does bad. It's incredibly simple to use out of the gate, but fun to mix together and master thanks to the depth and flow between everything here. In an earlier review I remember saying Generation Sonic was the best Modern has ever controlled, but after revisiting this game I think my opinion has changed. When playing the original version before Recompiled was a thing, I always felt like daytime Sonic was a little slippery and unresponsive, but thanks to Recompiled this game finally runs at a stable frame rate, so with all of the responsiveness issues fixed, I truly think that this is peak modern Sonic. It's a peak that even the exploits and glitches are extremely fun. Let me introduce you all to M speed and D speed, two techniques I cannot pull off for the life of me, but both equally break the game in the most chaotic ways. If you tilt the stick slightly forwards and then jump, you trick the game into increasing your speed instead of slowing you down, which means you can rack up some insane momentum and pull off some ludicrous skips. Speedrunners who are a million times better than me have used these techniques to basically skip entire stages. Just look at how people abuse the first act of Rooftop Run. Look! Not all of the exploits are crazy hard to pull off. QSS is a vital staple of Unleashed speedrunning and it's very easy to pull off in comparison. For QSS, all you need to do is hold down slided and quick step a bunch of times and you'll rack up crazy speed while grounded. This is great for blasting through long stretches that don't have many turns, or for drastically speeding up some slower parts of stages, which I'll get to soon. But if you've noticed a trend, a lot of the moves in this game are meant to keep you going forward and moving as fast as possible, which the stage design also reflects. Today's stages are all about getting to the end in the fastest and sauciest way possible, and thanks to the high speed and more linear gameplay, there isn't really much room for exploration. Oh! And in comes the most annoying part of Sonic Unleashed. What isn't so bad for one part of the game is truly the worst part of another. You see, progression in Unleashed is locked entirely behind how many of these Sun and Moon medals you collect, and you can't progress further through the story unless you gain a certain amount. This means while you're playing through stages, you gotta go out of your way to find these medals, which is fine at night but very annoying during the day. If you recall what I've been speaking about for the last however many fucking minutes, daytime Sonic's fundamental design is run fast, move forwards. So when you try and force in mandatory exploration, you just get something that doesn't really work. But as what? A majority of the daytime medals are placed in spots that are easy to notice or are rewards for reaching the higher paths. Actually, I'd agree. I'd say about 60% of the medals are placed in smart and inventive spots that would actually make sense for you to notice. As for the rest, Are we fucking serious? Yet Unleashed has a few medals that are just slapped in the most inconvenient spots that you'd just never check, which normally I would compliment if A, these medals weren't mandatory for progression, and B, this part of the game was actually designed to be played like this. I know I sound like a bit of a broken record at this point, but you got this exhilaratingly fast playstyle that the game pulls off so well, and then excruciatingly slow, you gotta slow down and break the flow just so you can actually progress through the game itself. It's even more annoying, and I know this isn't how development works, but when you consider the fact that the other version of Unleashed handled the medals so much better, it makes you wonder what the fuck happened here. In the Wii and PS2 versions, the medals were rewarded at the end of a stage based on your rank and how well you did, making progression far more fluid and way less annoying. On a more positive note, there are way better parts of the in-game progression. One of the coolest things about this game is how it led into a few RPG elements like the EXP system. Every time you destroy an enemy, they drop EXP shards which can be used to upgrade different stats for both versions of Sonic. While being far more important in the night, daytime Sonic also benefits from this, allowing you to upgrade your base speed and the amount of boost you can save up. What's weird about this system is you can go full RPG mode and actually grind for EXP if you really feel like being that much of a virgin. Along with the EXP shard, you could also gain EXP by eating food items available across the world. I'll go into more detail about the food later, but there's a sacred grinding method that involves abusing respawning rings and then inflating Sonic with as many hot dogs as humanly possible. Now, grinding isn't needed by any means necessary. The game is designed that even if you play the most average way, you'll be strong enough for whatever point you're at. Most of the time, but to this day I still find it crazy that you can EXP grind in a Sonic game if you really wanted to. Anyways, looking at the EXP system makes you realize how much chunkier the nighttime side of this game is, so how about we move on to the dark side. Daytime Sonic, you were perfect minus the medals, but it's finally time to dive headfirst into what did he do to get them reviewers that mad? Okay, there's a lot of things that the Werehog does really bad, but I'd say the main driving factor for the distaste for him is the fact that he doesn't really feel like Sonic. Reason number one, he's just kinda slow with everything he does. Whether it's the platforming, stage length, or the combat, the Werehog generally feels like a brick in comparison to normal Sonic. Let's start with the control. Ooga Booga Sonic over here was the first in the franchise to commit the cardinal sin of having a run button. I know, right guys, a run button. Not only is this dude slow as hell, you gotta manually make him run, I can't believe it. Sonic's normal walk is a snail's pace ass waddle, but upon holding RT he unleashes his true speed of 4 miles per year. Okay, jokes aside, I am fine with the slower speed. In fact, I truly think a Sonic game doesn't need to be fast, it just needs to feel fast. The Werehog's issue isn't his slower speed, it's just the fact that a lot of his gameplay doesn't feel fast enough or fluid enough to use. I mean, even looking at just the jump, it has the exact same problem as the daytime version, except the gameplay is much more platforming focused, so you feel the impact more here. The standard jump, while not that bad, doesn't feel as floaty or as high as it should be in my opinion, so every time I'm forced to make a precise jump, I do find myself cringing a little bit. Now, this can be compensated with the double jump, but even that doesn't feel amazing. It barely gains any additional height, plus you influence your mid-air direction even less when using the thing. At least the sprint jump is fun to use, it allows you to leap forward pretty far, plus as a bonus you get to keep all of your speed, making things a lot more fluid. But speaking of fluid, you guys want to know what's the opposite of that? Anything involving this nigga's stretchy arms. Okay, one unique ability the Werehog has is the power to stretch his arms like Mr. Fantastic. Don't ask me why he can do this, I'm not sure how the Dark Gaia tentacle man made his body stretchy, but it does lead to some of my favourite and least favourite parts of his moveset. The stretchy arms are used for climbing onto ledges, scaling up poles and swinging around, but it's about as consistent as my upload schedule. The grabbing isn't horrible, but it is a little janky, leaving it to have a few problems that I think everyone who's played this game can relate to. First of all, somehow it always manages to feel like it has a shorter range than it should. I couldn't tell you how many times it feels like I've missed a grab that should have totally been reachable. And second, while being a much bigger problem in the original because of the inconsistent frame rate, the input for the grab does feel a little bit unresponsive at times. Even if you factor in how holding or mashing the button is helpful for landing these grabs, I never feel confident when jumping between them, especially when above a bottomless pit. When you grab a ledge, you have many options. You can shimmy across from underneath to pull yourself along its path at mediocre speed. You can pivot and jump off of them in the most awkward and inconsistent way possible. You can swing on certain ones and use the momentum to jump further, which doesn't feel horrible but also doesn't feel amazing. And finally, worst of all, you can climb onto a ledge and start tightroping. very slowly. The tightroping is the driest part of every werehog stage. Here you gradually waddle along a small path while being forced to stay on balance the entire time. Not only is it kind of boring, it's also a pain in the ass because certain night stages have the giant issue of not showing the drop shadow. Ooh, that's really bad. You can't make a platformer with a million bottomless pits and then have an inconsistent drop shadow, man. That's like making a Sonic game with motion controls. Okay, to be fair, the shadow is affected by lighting as if it was one in real life, which does make sense, but I think sometimes you gotta compromise the logic for game experience. Anyways, if you're paying attention, I'm sure you've noticed a pattern at this point. I've described almost every move as slow, inconsistent, or somewhat janky, which if you can't tell makes the werehog nowhere near as fun to play. But then you also gotta factor in how the stages are designed, and then you really get to the second issue a lot of people have with the werehog. Problem number 2, things start to take a little too fucking long. The werehog stages are quite meaty in length, often ranging from 5 to 20 minutes, which is a little ludicrous for a Sonic game. You've already got much slower gameplay, so paired with the level length, the werehog can feel like an absolute drag to play. The biggest and most tedious aspect of all of these levels is the really underwhelming puzzles that they shove in every few minutes. In fact, calling them puzzles is a bit of a stretch. They're more like extended interactable obstacles. There's only 1 or 2 times I felt like I was solving something rather than just moving one thing to another place. In comes the agonizingly slow push and pull sections where you find a block or some other object and push it to one part of the stage. And that's it. But no, don't worry, there's also the switch puzzles where you pick up a coloured gemstone thingy and carry that over to the altar that matches its colour. Oh wow, how fun. You see the problem here, a lot of these puzzles or obstacles are really uncreative with how they're designed. It's just push something here, move something there, and when it's in 90% of the levels it gets stale really fast. The only puzzle that feels fun to solve is the medal collecting. Exploring around and finding where they're hidden is honestly really addictive at night. Many of them are stashed in corners or other hidden locations, some are behind breakable terrain, and a lot are placed in hard to reach sections that require some platforming skill to reach, which is pretty cool. The medal collecting in this half of the game adds quite a bit of depth to these stages, but it doesn't fully solve the biggest issue with the werehog's gameplay: monotony. Reason number 3 why people don't like the werehog: you're not Dante either, little bro. The combat in this game is nowhere near as bad as many reviewers make it sound, but it's also not special compared to the other games in this genre, which means many of the problems with this genre feels way worse here. For Unleashed, in my opinion, the main design problem stems from one thing: this game is intended for younger audiences. In fact, it's the same problem I have with Frontiers. Action games are fundamentally more complicated to design than other genres. So when you take that and make it for younger audiences, you gotta dumb down a lot of mechanics and make the game a lot easier in general. A lot of action games have the huge issue of being really repetitive, because if you look at the core of their gameplay, it is just going room to room and molly-whopping everything that moves. Now obviously you can boil any genre down to that. Platformers are walk and jump, shooters are point and click, but with action games it feels the worst because the combat encounters are usually pretty long. Whacking enemies in the goofiest ways possible is really fun, but if that's all you can do, it becomes stale really fast. In my opinion, what splits a good game in this genre from a bad one is variety. Give me a large selection of moves, give me a large selection of enemies and bosses, and most importantly give me memorable set pieces and areas that make me want to come back to these another time. All of these aspects are something Unleashed pulls off with varying quality between them, so let's start off simple with the werehog's moves. This abomination has a mix of attacks at his disposal, with the first being his trusty short-ranged hook claw scratch thingy. This is basically his light attack. It's fast and weak, but it's intended to be mixed with his other moves like his stretchy long-arm heavy attack. On pressing Y, you can extend Sonic's arms to hit a fairly long-range punch, which is slower than the regular attack but also hits far harder. Obviously that's not it for the combat. The real fun comes from the plethora of combos at your disposal. There are so damn many, but they aren't all available from the beginning. It's structured so that you unlock more as you progress, and they gradually get crazier and harder to pull off. I actually really like this system. It's a great way to make sure the player isn't overwhelmed at the start, and it always makes you feel like you're getting something new to try out when you progress. The new combos are unlocked by upgrading the combat meter in the EXP section, and I wasn't kidding about the EXP being far more important in this half of the game. The night stages are the main place where you gain EXP, and the werehog also has a flark ton to upgrade. You've got combat, which unlocks more combos, strength that makes you do more damage, life which increases your health bar, unleash which increases your unleash gauge, and finally shield, which does something. It seems kind of complicated at first, but you can just spam these wherever you want and be fine for the most part. As long as you upgrade your strength and combat, you'll steamroll through most of the game. Unleashed has a slight difficulty issue which I'll touch on later. Anyways, the combos themselves are a lot of fun, especially in the late game when you have a bunch unlocked. My personal favourites are the Werehill Rush, Spinning Needle Attack, the Earth Shaker and the Donkey Kick. The sheer amount of crazy combos is great, but they don't distract from the biggest thing that drags this combat down. Chaining different combos together is fucking miserable because of the disgusting amount of delay and end lag between every move. End lag is not a bad thing on its own, in fact it's one of the best ways to show your attacks have actual weight to them, but in this game there's just too damn much. It's so pace breaking during the normal combat. Oh, I just did this really fun combo. Oh wait, nope, gotta take a break. Oh wait, let's go do another one. Oh, Sonic's gonna catch his breath again. The delay between attacks makes the combat so much less fluid than it should be, which makes the Werehog just feel slow and clunky. It's very much like the rest of his issues, the platforming, the movement and now the combat are all fine in concept, but they're held back by stupid design decisions that just stop them from being great. Another thing I'm not really a fan of is the air combat, or rather the lack of real in-air options. You can launch enemies into the air and follow up, which is pretty cool, but the game only allows you to do a single combo before having to land again. Now to be fair, a lot of the air combos have finishers that will slam the enemy down to the ground, but others don't, so certain ones will just leave you in some type of awkward limbo where you watch yourself and the enemy fall to the ground, which doesn't feel the best. And overall, it doesn't feel the best is the best way to describe this combat. Yes, the combos are really flashy, but they lack that fluidity that this genre needs. It's not amazing, but it's still well designed enough to make the offensive side of Sonic's kit fun to use. The defensive side, however, okay, so I think, in my opinion, a game with good combat, and this is even outside of action games, has a nice balance of offense and defense. Unleashed has this. Without a good balance, it's very easy to have combat that feels mind-numbing and spammy. Like, there's no reason to think about what you're actually doing, and I feel like Unleashed really has this problem. The offensive options in this game feel really boring to use and feel really useless most of the time, which makes fighting the few enemies that actually hit back way less satisfying than it should be. You have a shield that will block off attacks until the weird meter runs out, and you also have a roll that you can use if you shield and press a direction. I think I used the shield about twice during my playthrough, and the roll somehow even less. 90% of this game can be steamrolled through by just button mashing, which is really lame. Once again, I know this game is intended for younger audiences, so I'm not asking for some frame perfect parry or complex dodge mechanic, but at least make it so that the enemies fight back in an engaging way. The enemies in the Werehog portion are questionable. Don't get me wrong, they have variety, but basically all of them are not that fun to fight or are really forgettable. The most common type is the Nightmare, and these are the generic demon monster things that every one of these games has. They just kind of exist. They'll attempt to punch you once in a blue moon, but usually they just stand there or jump around slightly until you hit them, and then they just take it. Pause. No, seriously, they don't do anything interesting, and even with the more difficult variants, I feel like they just stand there. The souped up versions of the Nightmares will occasionally block, meaning you need to break their guard, and generally they're tankier, jump around more, and throw quicker punches. Similar to the Nightmares, there's the Egg Robots, who are basically them if they attempted to fight back. They have much higher health, which is really annoying because during the day but at night you gotta keep hammering them for a while before they die. This is the worst when you consider the shield variant. These ones just stand there and guard, which drags the fights out even longer. The more offensive variants, like the chainsaw one and the gun one, attack pretty often, and I love that they whip out the goofiest shit. Like, tell me why they start breakdancing. Overall, the Egg Robots are solid enemies, but they don't solve this game's problem of feeling like mash attack to win, which is made even worse when you look at the next enemy. What does he do? This thing named Little Rex exists purely to be used as a dodgeball every time it shows up. They usually appear in giant clusters and will try and swarm you, but they die in like one hit, so they feel like a mild nuisance rather than an actual enemy. The most fun way to deal with them is grabbing them and swinging around like crazy, or launching them into another enemy. That's right, grabbing can also be used during combat, and honestly, if it was faster, more fluid and easier to use, it'd be one of the most fun things ever. You can grab smaller enemies or larger ones you knock down and then pick them up, but it suffers from the same shit as everything else, where it feels slow to use and not that great to chain into other things. You gotta grind to a halt and then watch a slow ass pickup animation before you can actually play around with whatever you grabbed. The options you get are at least fun to use. You can swing around in a circle, slamming the enemy into everything in your path. You can slam two enemies into each other like that one Toy Story monkey, or hit them with the Broly vs Goku like in that one movie. And finally, you can catapult them into other enemies, which is great, but again, I just wish it was faster. The fact picking things up is slow makes dealing with the next enemy a little frustrating, and anyone who's played Unleashed can agree with me here. fuck the wasps. Flying enemies are generally some of the most annoying enemies to deal with in this genre, and the wasps take that feeling to another level. The wasps love to zip around and dodge attacks and fly towards you really fast, which is fairly frustrating to deal with because once again you move like a brick. The most effective way to deal with them is to throw something at them, but grabbing things takes time to do, which doesn't mesh well with how fast these enemies are. However, as annoying as they are, I do love that these exist because they're one of the few enemies that require you to use your brain a little bit to defeat. You can't just run at them most of the time, which is great, and it helps improve on the depth that, in my opinion, the enemies really lack. It's just a shame that thanks to the not so fleshed out air combos and generally slow movement that these things can feel frustrating to deal with. But while we're on the topic of more unique enemies, another class that I think is cool in concept are the witches. These have many variants, and rather than being purely focused on attacking, they have special effects thanks to their magic. Some can heal other enemies, others buff them up, but I want to save my thoughts on a few variants for when we get to their respective stages. Overall, they make the average combat encounter more interesting, but there's still not enough to get rid of the absolute monotony that plagues this half of the game. Yes, there's a bunch of different enemies, but does that really matter when most of them blend in together and the ones that don't are jarring to fight? It gets really stale compared to other games in this genre because there's nothing to look forward to. You walk from room to room, destroy the many mindless enemies that don't really fight back, and rinse repeat for all of these long ass light stages. And then combined with the playing as the werehog can really do a number on your brain. And back on that topic of nothing to look forward to, I also think all of the bosses and mini bosses in the werehog portion are somehow worse than the enemies. Action games usually have great mini bosses that take the skills you've learned from fighting normal enemies and puts them to the test against stronger and more menacing foes. Unleashed does not have that. Instead, we have two giant hideous masses that are so unfun to fight you'd wonder why they show up every other level. The first is what I like to call the Drunk Caveman. The Drunk Cavemen are giant in structure, covered in spikes, and build massive clubs on top of their already imposing figure. Now you might think to yourself, he's got a giant weapon, so most of the fight must involve dodging its swings and waiting to attack, right? Nope, this nigga attacks by jumping. He'll swing his bat once very slowly, and then after that he'll jump. Wow, the real stinkiest, dirtiest, grimiest, most annoying and most frustrating part about this fight is how awkward interacting with the jump is. If you're too close, it will knock you down and stun you on the ground for an extended time, and you can only recover by spamming A bunch of times. That's not all, sadly, since this motherfucker is giant, he'll also send down a shockwave which stuns you for the exact same length as the jump, which means you'll spend even more time making out with the floor. And to make it worse, because both of these things happen one after the other, it often means you get stunned twice in a row, which if you can't tell just sucks to face against. Stun locking, seriously, this isn't Overwatch 1, it's the least fun thing to ever have inside of a game. This is an absolute failure of a mini boss. The Drunk Caveman doesn't feel like an evolution that you need more skill to take down. It just feels like they took a nightmare, stretched it out, and then cranked up its health bar by 1,000,000%. The most effective way to get rid of the Drunk Caveman is to get him to half HP and then go for a quick time event to finish them off completely. Quick time events are a mechanic I've neglected to mention up until now, and it's one of the more controversial parts of Unleashed. Some people absolutely hate these things, and I gotta ask the people that have this opinion, are you stupid? Quicktime events are fun, and I don't care what you tell me. They make parts of this game way more interactive, and it adds far more skill and depth to even the most basic mechanics. One thing I will say is I prefer how they're implemented at day over how they are at night. The faster gameplay just suits quicktime events more, because whenever I do these at night, I just get whiplashed. During the day, they're mainly used on special trick ramps. Whenever you go off these, your success with the QTE will decide if you end up on a higher path or lower one if you fail. I love these. They start off easy but ramp up more as the game progresses, and they're great for removing the automation that the ramps have. There's also quick time panels that show up occasionally, and pressing the correct button allows you to jump between them quickly. At night, the QTEs are slightly weaker but still fun enough with how they're implemented. During combat, occasionally a symbol will show up on weakened enemies, and on pressing B you can initiate a multi-step QTE that will insta-kill the enemy. It looks cool and it's great for increasing your rank at the end of levels, but it does take kinda long to do, so why would I do all of that when I can just... Against the mini bosses, it's a lot more useful, but it does come with a greater risk. Failing these QTEs in any way will cause the target to regain health, which is not good in the slightest. But if you do pull them off successfully, you'll essentially skip half of the fight, which is great because some of these can drag out for a long ass time. Another way to deal with these mini bosses effectively is by using the Unleashed gauge, which is basically Sin Furry trigger. Dead enemies will drop energy that will fill up the Unleashed gauge, and once past a certain point you can trigger Sonic's Kaioken and amp up all of his stats. You move faster plus your attacks are stronger, and thanks to these changes, the combat with Unleashed active is fucking riveting. It gets rid of the disgusting end lag and actually lets you fluidly chain combos together. It feels like exactly what the base combat should have felt like. Using this on the mini bosses is a great way to absolutely shred them, and combined with the items, you can delete them before they even have a chance. There are items scattered around that help you during combat, with the most fun one being the claws. These grant a large upgrade to your attack strength, and these can be stacked on top of the Unleashed gauge, which is bonkers. Conveniently, they're placed in areas with a lot of enemies or an incoming mini boss, so it's always smart to go out of your way to check for these so you can speed up these boring-ish encounters. Anyways, it's time for the second mini boss that's slightly less annoying, who I like to call Big Mama.
Selling narcotica. How much do it cost, bitch? None, zip, nada.
Similar to the drunk caveman, it's tall in stature, but this time wields no weapon and decides to attack by giving birth. It will spawn a bunch of little Rexes and then it will do a spin attack. Were they running out of ideas? At the very least, it's a little less annoying to fight than the caveman because they don't stun lock you, but it is still a boring ass fight. What makes these two so disappointing is the fact that they show up a lot, but they never evolve as the game progresses. Matter of fact, all of the enemies kinda have this problem as well. They don't get more aggressive or gain any new attacks and surprises, they just get their health bar increased and that's it. The only merit is it's kinda fun to watch yourself wail away at giant enemies, but once that feeling wears off, you end up with a steaming pile of repetitive slop. The boss fights sadly aren't enough to make this problem go away either. For the most part, they're gimmick bosses, so they don't really feel like fights. I'll expand on this for each boss as we get there, but I think it's finally time to move away from the combat for now. Overall, it's not bad, but it just misses the mark in several areas, especially with the enemies. But I am willing to forgive it a little because at the end of the day, it's not the entire focus of the werehog or the game itself. The focus also includes the platforming and all of the other elements, and when you consider that, the werehog's still not the greatest, but he still holds a special place in my heart. I can look past most of the flaws because I enjoy this type of gameplay way too much. Plus, I think in general, Unleashed more than makes up for these shortcomings by feeling like the most complete and grand Sonic adventure of all time. 8 different areas to fully explore, fit with multiple hub worlds and day and night changes between them. 17 full-on stages to play at minimum with a bunch of extra unlockable ones, and that's not even including DLC. There's side missions for EXP and extra combat arenas depending on how much you interact with the world. And most importantly, food. There's a lot of food here, which is really taking the RPG elements to another level. This game is just packed with a lot of content, so let's start off where it all kicks off. Windmill Isle Act 1, what a soothing place to crash headfirst into. This beautiful mountainside serves as a great tutorial. It's got open space and easy to avoid hazards, but it's still fast like everything to come. There isn't that much to say about the stage design other than the giant loopy bridge that cannot be functional for the people living here, but one thing I really like is the setting. I always love when games structure their levels to make you feel like you're actually progressing through the world to get to another place or objective. Here you start on the outskirts full of grass and nature and all that other stuff, but it ends off with you actually entering the village. This village is where the first hub world in the game takes place, and these are a staple of the Unleashed experience. Hub worlds in general are very hit or miss across the franchise, but I think they absolutely nail them here. They're not giant and aimless like in 06 and to an extent Adventure, instead they're very small and compact but with just enough to explore so you don't get bored. What really makes these hub worlds so special to me is the people, and more specifically the interactions and the variety that they have. Across the many hub worlds there's a bunch of NPCs to talk to, and while the conversations aren't groundbreaking, they're still very endearing and entertaining. Oftentimes they'll just talk about each other or the areas they live in, and sometimes they just make comments on how weird Sonic looks. Another little detail is as you progress and fix the world, you'll notice people from other areas start visiting these places as tourists. They say some absolute nothing burgers, but it does make me feel more immersed in the world because it functions like our real world does. Anyways, Apotos, Apatos, however you pronounce its hub world, is a great introduction. You've got the main road with a beautiful mountainside view, but then there's also the back alley section with a nice and humble shop. Other than that, it doesn't have much going for it, but its nice and comfortable environment mixed with the amazing music makes it one of my favorite areas in the entire game. Just like this environment, the people here are also really laid back, which is another thing I really love about the tone in Unleashed. The planet is ruptured apart with whole continents suspended in the air, and a dark being full of evil and highness power is spreading itself across the globe. Want some ice cream? But hey, let's not get too ahead of ourselves. The NPCs do still serve a purpose, and it's generally pointing you in the right direction. Chip's amnesia is still incredibly Wow, great sentence. During this part of the game, Chip's amnesia is still very prevalent, so Sonic goes around asking if anyone knows who he actually is. Unfortunately, none of them really know who the little guy is, but they do give the very important advice that basically equates to play a stage, motherfucker. After walking through this mysterious gate, you're brought to the weird stage hub area places. These are like the normal hub worlds but with no NPCs, and you have full access to all of your abilities. As you progress through the game, these areas will slowly expand, allowing you to access all of the extra stages and other goodies hidden around. For now, we can only access Windmill Isle Act 2, but that's completely fine because dare I say it's the best opening level in the entire franchise. I don't think there are enough words in the English language to describe how much I want to fuck this stage. First of all, it's stunning visually. The white terrain and buildings mix so well with the vibrant cliffs and Mario's sunshine-ass water. The most beautiful parts are the rail grinding sections above the sea. These are the best places in the level to actually admire the scenery since we usually blast past it at 1,000,000 miles per second. Actually, that's another strange thing about this game. Don't get me wrong, I love the effort put into the graphics, but during most stages you never really get to pay attention to them, so like, was it really worth it? This was most notorious in Jungle Joyride Act 1, where it was famous for running at 10 frames per year on the consoles it was released on. Don't get me wrong, it was beautiful and I'm glad 2 generations later we could finally experience this game, but I don't know why they didn't tone it down just a little bit so that the game could actually run. Anyways, the second reason I want this stage to have my kids is just because of how well designed it is. It's difficult enough without being annoying while staying forgiving enough to not feel entirely cheesy. You can't just run around with your brain off and drool coming out of your mouth. You need to learn the basics and actually apply them in a smart way. One great example is the beginning alleyway section. There's this short stack of wood you need to jump over, and if you fail you'll stumble and lose a bit of speed, which ends up not being a big deal overall. The consequence is tiny, but it does a good job of getting you used to reacting quickly because later in the level the same thing comes back. Towards the end there's another short hop, but this time with spikes, which is obviously a greater risk, but you've been in this situation before so you know what to do this time. It's the most basic part of the most basic part of game design. Introduce a challenge, let the player learn it and make it harder as the game progresses. The rest of the level is great as well. All of the 3D sections are exhilarating and even the 2D is really great. As I'm sure most of you know, Unleashed was the first game to introduce the style of rapidly switching between 3D and 2D on the fly, and it's extremely fluid here. The 2D sections are just as fun as the 3D, and honestly in this level I actually prefer them. They've got a great sense of flow with interesting shortcuts, and even the medals are as inoffensive as possible. And finally, last but not least, the third reason I want to make out with this level is the music. It's just beautiful, man. This song is immensely popular for a reason. It's memorable, upbeat, and makes blasting through this level a wonderful experience. But we can't be happy for too long. There's still a night stage to play, and this one is something I'd give a slight side hug to. It's not amazing, but it's not horrible. It's not something I want to replay, but it's also not something that pisses me off. One thing I both like and dislike about the night stages is the contrast between them and the day ones. At night, you slow down, which means you can soak in these environments way more. Plus, a lot of these make you visit different parts of the same areas in the day ones. A great example is Rooftop Run. During the day it's parkour galore across all of these roofs, but at night it might as well be called alleyway crawl with how it's played. The problem is, since these levels are slower and less bombastic, they don't really have anything that makes them that memorable. With a lot of the day levels, I can off the top of my head name multiple areas inside them that stick out to me and leave an impression. At night I can only do the same thing because of the areas I hate replaying and the areas that piss me off. It's a big issue a lot of them have, and Windmill Isle Night is a stellar example of this. The stage is as inoffensive as possible, but I can only recall the mind-numbing tightroping at the end and the stupid mini-boss, and that's because both of these are slow and annoying as hell. The rest takes place in the streets and alleyways where you punch enemies, punch walls, and do the boring ass switch puzzles, but that's all I can say about this level. Well, let's see what's next. Okay, remember when I mentioned how QuickTime events were controversial? This stage right here is the prime reason why. Sega was in the studio and said, what if we made a rhythm game with no rhythm? Welcome to the tornado segments where you do a string of QuickTime events and then you spam RB and then you do it again and again and again and again and again and again. Okay, let's not be too harsh. At least there's a bit of variety in how these QuickTime events are presented. Some will be in a chain that you gotta do in a specific order, and others will require you to spam multiple times, so at least it's not just doing the same thing over and over. Ooh. This minigame ends with a boss fight against Eggman's ship, and it's it's alright. It cycles between spamming a button to blow his back out and then dealing with the fodder and rinse repeat until it's finally done. You can hear the joy in my voice. This level really isn't that fun, but it's also not horrible. Basing a whole level on quick time events is just kinda stupid though. These things work better in bursts rather than being the entire focus of a long stretch of something. The only cool part is watching yourself fly overseas and reach the next area in real time, because once that spectacle wears off, this is just a pretty dry level overall. Spagonia, the place that you are. Based on most of Western Europe and especially Italy, it makes for one of the most memorable areas in this entire game. The hub is a lot bigger than the last, full of shops along the main street, several unlockable and explorable alleyways, and most importantly, the giant university where Professor Pickle operates. The stages here are phenomenal as well. Rooftop Run Day needs zero introduction. It was brought back in Gens for a reason, it's that good. From the iconic alleyway section to the climbing of the giant clock tower, Rooftop Run is great and has the amazing feat of actually making a fun vertical platforming segment. It also introduces the giant killer robots, which are a staple of a lot of the day stages. Here you slow down just a tiny bit and have to avoid these giant lasers and other obstacles while launching a bunch of egg robots back at their faces. Even though slowing down is a little bit lame, I love the cinematic feel these sections have, especially because of the camera. But thanks to Unleashed being broken, QSS is a great way to bypass the speed cap, so you can actually blast through these sections with a little bit more skill. Even Rooftop Run Night is decently fun. Out of all of the night stages, I think it has the best blend and balance of all of those elements I spent a long ass time explaining before. Yeah, the dogshit puzzles are here, but that's only really in one part. The combat encounters are actually fun because there's no drunk caveman present, and the platforming, especially near the end, is surprisingly enjoyable. The last third of the level requires you to scale up the clock tower from the inside, and for a vertical Sonic section, the level design is actually creative. Spagonia ends with a pretty good boss fight, but I'll get to it in a minute because technically it comes after the one in Mazuri pisses me off. It's not the level design or music or anything related to the game itself, it's just a personal thing, you know? Look at this person. Do you see anything wrong? Okay, how about now? Okay, listen, I get everyone in this game looks a little fucked up, but come on, Sega, what is this? Anyways, Mazuri is good, but just not the most special place in the game. Everyone that's surprised when I say this, but the day stage is good? What? The highlight is the ending part with the tree. It has looping level design, I guess, where you gradually wrap around until you reach the top. If you fall, you just re-enter the loop, which is really inventive in terms of level design, and that sentiment also extends into the night stage. This is literally the only stage in the game with semi-creative puzzles. There's a lot of pushing blocks, but at least they require above 20 IQ to use properly. There's a lot of height adjustable platforms and high areas you need to reach, so by using both the blocks and the platforms in tandem, you can actually reach these areas and progress. Yeah, that's it really. Yeah, I did say it was semi-creative, not actually insane. It is still a step up from move a coloured block to a designated place, so at least I can appreciate that. The best part of Mazuri by far is the boss fight. This shit fucking slaps. The day bosses are essentially Sonic Dash on crack. They all play like auto runners where you chase down Eggman while avoiding attacks, similar to the robot sections I mentioned before. This one is called the Egg Beetle, and can I just say I love how it's a bug-inspired abomination. It'll attack by launching dodgeable missiles and bombs until you eventually get close enough to ram head first into him, sending him flying comically far. That's not all, this boss actually opens up some skill expression. If you save up enough boost, you can follow up and hit him multiple times. Not only is it hilarious to watch, it also cuts the fight time in half, which is a great way to reward more resourceful players. Overall, the fight is really frantic and satisfying. It's great how they managed to create a boss that matches the high speed of everything else in the game. I think the defeat of the Egg Beetle hit him so hard he doesn't even bother showing up next time. The Egg Devil Ray is piloted by these strange mini robots as a replacement. Back to Spagonia we go. Eggman decided to ditch the whole robot insect idea and this time went with a fish, which is far less menacing. 300 IQ by the way. This fight is more of the same as last time, except it evolves by having multiple phases. Phase 1 replaces the rockets from last time with lasers and projectiles, which are a little more difficult to dodge than the last. The second and final phase is actually transitioned to 2D briefly and feature a spinning laser attack, but after a few hits it's back to 3D and eventually the end of the boss. Just like the first, it's an enjoyable fight, but they've both been really easy so far. Chun-nan is another fan favourite area, and I can say it's for the right reasons. well, before sunset at least. Of course, both hub worlds are stunning. The stage area is my second favourite place in the game visually. I love the use of the green water in contrast with the grey cliffs and red buildings. It makes the area feel mystical and one of a kind. Dragon Road Day is phenomenal, especially when it comes to being flashy and all in your face. Like, look at me, I'm running along the Great Wall of Chun-nan on top of mountains, I'm jumping between dragons, I'm riding on top of multiple fireworks, I'm running on water, Okay, the platforming sections aren't my favourite, but this level has a lot more good than it has just okay. Towards the end, the robot running sections make a return, but this time the encounter has a lot more variations. What's interesting about this encounter is the camera is facing away from the direction you're running while hazards are still active from the front. So at the same time, you gotta avoid all of these hazards coming from in front of you plus the lasers from behind, which is a great test of skill and reflexes. Dragon Road Night is not as good as a level, but it's still creative like the day one. In fact, they get you used to this immediately by sticking a medal behind where you spawn. They love abusing these bending poles that will launch you in the air, and with creative use of your grabs, you could also use these enemies to reach higher paths and skip entire sections. There's also this giant encounter at the end with about 5 million enemies, but if you're explorative enough, you'll find a strange electric spewing robot. If you throw it at them and wait for it to activate, you teach all of these motherfuckers a brutal lesson on why water and electricity don't mix. I love this kind of mechanic, and other night stages have a similar thing, but just not done in a way that's anywhere near as fun. Chun-nan Night is just alright. It doesn't do anything offensive. Wait, actually no, it does. It introduced the wasps. 0 out of 10. Oh looky, it's time for our first night boss, and if you remember what I said earlier, I don't really like any of these that much. The Dark Gaia Phoenix is phenomenal in terms of lore and design. It's a giant creature that actually protects the temple but has now been corrupted by Dark Gaia, so it's flaming and angry now. In terms of gameplay, when I get here I'm like, damn, I want to beat the shit out of this massive bird, that'd be really fun. But then the game replies with, no sir, you get a shitty ass gimmick boss where you actually fight it for about 10 seconds max. The fight is the definition of, here the bird is on fire, so you put it out by throwing water, then you punch it a little bit, QTE, and rinse repeat until the boss is dead. The only difficulty comes from trying to stay awake while slowly moving around with water jugs in your hand, but that's not what I want to be challenged by. I want an actual fight like I've been training for with the rest of the gameplay. The idea of a gimmick boss isn't bad, but the one time I actually get to use my fist, it just stands there and takes it and doesn't fight back. It takes any challenge and skill away from what you'd like to actually see it in, and as a whole it just makes the fight feel really dull. The next boss also has similar problems, and while we're on the topic, I'ma just skip to it. Fuck you, Halaska, you're not getting an edit. The Dark Moray is also a gimmick boss that I think is generally better, but somehow more annoying if that makes any sense. The fight consists of 3 phases, each with 2 parts to get through. The first part involves dealing with the little dragons on the outside to eventually break the shield and leave the actual boss open to attack. The second part is against the actual Moray itself. It will do a variety of attacks, and your objective is to find its weak spot and smash away. As you go from phase to phase, the weak spots get harder to reach, and the little dragons become a lot faster, which makes freezing them very imperative. When they're frozen, they're a million times more vulnerable, but actually freezing them is where the fight gets annoying because grab, slow movement, you get it at this point. At the very least, this boss is more combat focused than the last. I actually get to punch things for longer than 2 seconds, but it's still not the greatest. As for the rest of Halaska and its stages, they're both good. It's an ice-themed area, which means all of the levels have... Lord have mercy. The day level is fun and fast. I'm running out of things to say about these. It introduces sledding, which returns in one evil-ass section later. Other than that, well, there's a big whale. Yippee. College Night is actually pretty good as well, especially because the stage has a lot of interactivity. They love using breakable terrain here. Several platforming sections will have falling objects you need to jump with good timing between, otherwise it's GG's. You can also melt several obstacles with fire. That's pretty cool. I'm hilarious, right guys? Hold on. Sorry, the music is way too good here. Shamar is the second large area in the game. Similar to Spagonia, the hub world is giant and also hosts another one of Professor Pickle's labs. This place is an absolute labyrinth to explore, and you can really tell it is because it has 8 medals hidden inside it. 8. Shamar is often hated for both its stages, but you want to know my hot take? I fucking love Shamar Day. This is the holy skill check level. There are a lot of fun shortcuts, but also a bunch of stupid shit. It's one of those levels you gotta replay 50 times to truly enjoy. Luckily, I've played it 50 times. Here's some of my favourite shortcuts. Right from the bat in the drift section with a million people and obstacles, a tight enough turn will slam you into speed panels, letting you completely avoid them. During the giant loop around the middle of the stage, jumping before the speed panels will completely ignore the slowest area down below. There's this part with spikes and bouncing pillars, which is much slower than anything else. Thankfully, it could be completely avoided by boosting off a specific spring. And finally, during the rail grinding section over a giant pit, you can take an extra risk and jump off, homing attack, and do a few QTEs to end up on the much faster rail. Arid Sun's Day is a level with a lot of bullshit but a lot of skill expression, and that's why I like it so much. Arid Sun's Night is just bullshit. This level is the most combat oriented in the game, which I actually like as a concept, but sadly it's plagued with a lot of annoying mechanics and terrible level design choices. The first sin is the flaming wizards. These are some of the most annoying enemies to deal with. Yes, including you. They're one of those where you can't hit them straight away. If you try, you'll get stunned out of any combo you attempt unless the fire is put out. I don't get it. Why take a mechanic from the most boring boss ever and let it give birth to the most boring enemies of all time? The water barrels are the solution to this. You gotta throw them into the flaming wizards, but you know, I've said it like a billion times, you get it. Grab, slow, boring, blah blah blah. And that brings me to the second and most unholy sin about this level. The level design itself. The enemy choices and puzzle choices here are really frustrating. In fact, there's a bunch of areas I can name and flame just off the top of my head. These motherfuckers for some reason included a 4-way switch puzzle, which is as fun as it sounds. Make it worse, some of these switches are locked behind enemy encounters. One of them is in a room with 2 empowered wasps and a flaming wizard, which is a combination made by Satan himself. And then... Hello? Go up the stairs, nigga. The game then decides to hit you with the greatest pump fake in gaming history. Okay, so there's this staircase that an inexperienced player might think holds another switch or something similar hidden away, but upon reaching the top you'll realize, hold on, there's nothing here, and you're thrown into the hardest battle room in the entire game for zero reason at all. It starts with a wizard, a wasp, and 2 deep nightmares, and then starts spawning waves upon waves upon waves of threats ready to absolutely jump you. Thankfully I've played this a million times, so I'm used to this, but I can imagine a first time player coming up here and getting stuck for a while. But here's the kicker, this whole arena is completely optional. The only rewards for coming up here are a measly sun medal, a record, an extra life which will probably be redundant if you keep dying here, and some EXP. Wow. I usually love combat encounters and I'm not one to complain about extra things being in a level, but once again that balance of offense and defense isn't there, so destroying this wave just feels like spamming over and over. With that being said, combined with the monotony of the fire wizards and the lackluster stage design and puzzle design overall, I think this is my least favourite night stage. Luckily for it, it has the best music in the entire game. Unfortunately, I'm gonna have to cut the music short because sadly Shamar has the most boring boss fight in human history. Let me ask you all something. What do you enjoy in a good boss fight? Is it challenging attack patterns, memorable set pieces and sequences, or do you just enjoy having a big thing to test all of your skills on? What's that? Pushing a giant cinder block? Well, me too! The Dark Guardian may sound and look imposing, especially with his giant hammer, but just like a certain someone, that has nothing to do with the actual fight. Instead, you hit the Guardian enough to stun it and then push this stupid block into the treadmill. And then you do it again, and then you do it again, and then you do it again. Surely I don't have to explain what's wrong with this, right? Like, the footage speaks for itself. This fight makes me feel like this picture. Notice how there's nothing on screen. There's no gratification, there's no happiness here, there's no reward for beating this guy. This fight has nothing memorable about it other than Sonic admitting he's a hit scan main right at the end.
I know little girls.
This is still the worst written line in Sonic history. Fun fact, this place has zero plot relevance. Everywhere else in the game either has a temple, boss fight, or small story beat associated with it, but Empire City has none of these. The hub world's a circle, the stage area is an even bigger circle, and any look at the levels makes you realize this cannot be a functional city that people live in. These stages have the worst case of whiplash in the entire game. During the day, you're running down highways in the middle of the fucking sky, up and across buildings, over dangerous walkways with rotating spikes, and outrunning giant death robots that give the gun truck a run for its money. Meanwhile, at night, You like tight platforming, man. You like bottomless pits, man. You like inconsistent drop shadows, man. You like boring tightrope sections, man. Because that's all this stage has. The only notable part is when they decide to slap a drunk caveman on top of a building, which would be a fun challenge if the hitboxes and stun mechanic wasn't so annoying and janky. Other than that, it's an absolute nothing burger stage in my opinion, but thankfully it's followed by a much better one. I fucking love Adabat. It's my favorite area in the entire game, plus it's really creative to see a beach themed level as a final hurdle. Strangely though, for a penultimate level, Adabat, good one! Strangely, for a penultimate level, Adabat Night is pretty soothing. It doesn't have any special section or special mechanic up until right at the end with this unique puzzle. In order to get rid of the waterfall, you gotta press all 4 of these super spread out switches in the right order. It does take a bit of trial and error, but I do really enjoy all the platforming in between. It's nothing insane, but I do like how they tried to spice it up. It's just a shame they used it once and it's only really at the end of the game. In terms of difficulty, this stage is also the only one to have both mini bosses in it. It also has the most insta-kills since you're platforming right above water and Sonic can't swim, but other than those two things, it's a very typical night level. They saved all the sauce for the day portion and holy shit it was worth it, because Jungle Joyride Day is my favorite level in any game I've ever played, ever. I know right guys, holy glaze, but seriously, the level design absolutely peaks here. It nails the difficulty and feeling that a late stage game should have. Every skill you've learned is tested here in some way. Right off the bat, your reaction time is tested to the extreme with the iconic Broadwalk section. You're required to quick step through these already thin paths without falling off, avoid the geysers shooting up water from down below, destroy all of the robots that get in your way while ducking underneath axes, all while boosting at maximum speed. The water running sections keep your pulse pounding. Along with looking extremely awesome, these sections are very expansive with how they're designed. There's a lot of space to run around in, and even though you're limited to a restricted path, these often interweave with other ones with creative shortcuts. Don't let open space fool you though, hazards are still present everywhere like the falling pillars or occasional geyser. The 2D across the whole stage is where memorization is key. They loved hard to stay on higher paths, quick time events and these directional cannons. I forgot to mention them up until now, but these appear in every other level. Once inside, you'll get launched in different directions based on whatever key is pressed. It's usually designed where each input will put you on a different path, but this level was really great at masking what direction to head in. During the later half, the 2D sections really ramp up in creativity and challenge. There's wall jumping between flamethrowers, timing homing attacks on spiky spinning springs, and outrunning falling spikes in order to get through these ruins. Speaking of ruins, this stage is so grand and climactic that it had to be split into 2 parts. It's the only in the game to have a full transition mid-stage. It does look a bit awkward, but it's worth it. The final third is great, especially in terms of spectacle. I love the canvassing shot of the waterfall in the background while on rails near the end. It's a great way to make the ending feel way more cinematic. Overall, as I said before, the entire stage is peak, and it's followed by a pretty fun but sadly pretty easy boss. The Egg Lancer is an amalgamation of both the previous bosses. By combining aspects of both fights, Eggman created a giant death machine that goes down in less than 2 minutes. At least he's learned from his mistakes. It's impossible to rapidly ram into him like the last times. Instead, Eggman actually recovers before landing another hit is possible. The pattern this time involves dodging the giant blue death lasers using the quick step and slide until you're eventually close enough to attack. After enough damage is done, a quick time sequence will play out where Sonic jumps between buildings before dive bombing Kratos style into the mech. It only takes about 2 sets of doing this to beat the boss, and as I said before, it can be done in under 2 minutes. It's a shame because as fun as this fight is, it's nowhere near as difficult as a late game boss should be. Thankfully, Sonic Unleashed has got us. It makes up for this by having a very grand, iconic and difficult finale, plus it all starts off with a... On entering this Gaia temple, Chip is mysteriously sucked into the void while a strange voice arises from the echoes. This voice is actually his own in the form of his past memories, and it reminds Chip of his true identity, the light Gaia. That's right, this chihuahua is actually about to do something. He's the polar opposite of dark Gaia, which... Sure, coughing baby versus hydrogen bomb much. The reason Chip has amnesia is because he woke up way too early. Every billion years, both Dark and Light Gaia awaken and resume their godly task of destroying the planet and then mending it back together. However, thanks to a certain load-bearing egg, the cycle was interrupted, leading to the events we've seen throughout the game. It's a very unique plot twist, but I wish it was just a little more gradual. Once again, it's a Sonic story, so it's never that serious, but Chip goes from pulling chocolate out of nowhere to a cosmic deity in literally a single cutscene. My favorite favourite thing about giant plot twists and anything revolving around mysteries is when the details in the background give you clues for the twist without making it obvious. And the thing is, they do that here, but just in the final cutscene instead of the game as a whole. If you pay attention to the carving on the wall, you'll see Chip painted on with a giant creature surrounding him. For the rest of the game, it depicts an emerald with a bunch of hands underneath, but here it changes, foreshadowing what's to come. It's great, I just wish they did that a little earlier, but it does remind me of Sonic 3 and Knuckles, so the story still gets its bonus points. After that revelation, Chip goes to stare at the Sonic Unleashed sunset. But on a more serious note, him and Sonic are about to have a heartfelt and surprisingly mature interaction. Writing in this cutscene is stellar for this type of game. It takes the typical friends are everything message, but at least conveys it in a non-generic way, plus it even throws in some confidence building.
I bet it's thanks to you. Even at night when I'm like this, I'm still myself, not like all the other people we've seen. You must have been protecting me this whole time.
I haven't done anything, Sonic. You're the reason you haven't changed at all. You're too strong to lose yourself.
I'm the reason?
Yeah, you never doubt yourself, no matter what. You never give in to the night or the darkness inside your heart. I think it's because I knew that about you.
My favourite part is when Chip attempts to fly away thinking he doesn't need Sonic anymore, just to get pulled back into one of Sonic's only good one-liners.
Whoa, what?
Where do you think you're off to all by yourself?
What? But my memory is back now, and, well, from here on out, it's my responsibility, so, I mean, there's no reason for you to come along, so I should just...
Do I need a reason to want to help out a friend?
Thanks, Sonic.
I love this line. It solidifies Sonic's character of helping everyone in need and cements him and Chip's friendship without being corny like Sonic heroes. They both set their sights on the final Gaia temple, which is located in the heart of Eggman's mysterious continent. And together, along with Tails, they fly towards the end of this adventure. You know what that means, guys? It's time for another tornado segment. Woo! Just like last time, it's another stretch of quick time event slop, except way harder and way less fun. It even ends with the exact same boss as well, so there goes any variety of surprise there could have been. It's like they just slapped a red filter onto the last stage and called it a day. Everything I said last time still applies, and overall these stages are still the definition of mid, with nothing engaging to talk about other than the cutscene after where Sonic jumps off a plane.
Welcome to Eggmanland, the brainchild of my heart and soul.
He's not kidding. Eggmanland is an area that's been teased since Sonic Adventure, and it's also what he's been building throughout the entire course of this adventure. During the story, they occasionally cut away to Eggman's shenanigans, which basically boil down to him having issues with his plan and beefing with his new creation Orbot. The humour between these two with these cutscenes is some of the best in the game, and honestly it's around the same level as the Sonic Boom TV show.
Oh, of all the lazy, here I go to the trouble of waking that Dark Gaia thing up, and it causes me nothing but delays.
Dark Gaia had yet to reach maturity within the planet's core, ergo it was still incomplete at the time of its awakening, ergo it was unable to sustain its own weight upon its release, ergo it scattered around the world.
Ugh. I don't want to hear about its weight issues.
The reason why half the bosses are piloted by the little robo fellas is probably because Eggman's too busy making evil Disneyland, and trust me, it lives up to the hype.
Ugh, he's enjoying this way too much.
Sonic! I can feel the last temple nearby. He must have built this place on top of it.
Well, I guess we'll just have to tear it down. Here we go!
No, I'd rather not. Fun fact, Eggmanland was actually designed by Lucifer itself. It's befittingly the hardest challenge in the entire franchise, which only a psychopath in Sega Studio could have created. It does something incredibly unique where instead of having a separate day and night stage, they're combined into one giant gauntlet which tests both halves of this game at maximum difficulty. I'll cover the day sections first because that's what we start with. The stage immediately backhand slaps you into this new reality by kicking off with a 5-step QuickTime event. The QuickTime torture doesn't end there because later on in the level, they love abusing these. Just look at this.
Alright, let's not fail this QuickTime event.
Fucking hell. But oh no, that's not the worst thing here. There's many other iconic sections and gimmicks that all have me genuinely scarred for life. One great example is the roller coaster of doom and demise. In these sections, the sledding from Halaska returns, but with a bunch of annoying hazards to jump over and get around while staying on these already slim paths. The steering is the big thing that makes these parts memorable for the wrong reasons. It somehow feels too slippery and too stiff at the same time, which, yeah, I don't know how they pulled that off. Interestingly enough, the 2D is where most of the torture is. The 3D might have evil treadmills and evil skydiving, but the 2D is where all the challenging platforming comes into effect. I think this is the first stage with disappearing platforms, and what a time to use them. There's a lot of do and die areas, and combined with these disappearing platforms, these parts become very tricky and difficult. On top of that, these psychopaths also added moving blocks that don't just push you out of the way, they push you out of the 2D plane entirely. So you combine those, the disappearing platforms, and all the lasers and swords available, and you get some of the most torturous 2D sections in the entire Sonic gaming franchise. However, as bad as that sounds, none of this compares to the grittiness of the nighttime sections. Now this is where the nightmare begins. The level design for the werehog parts are so 50-50. There's some areas that are really creative and others that can burn in a pit. I'm gonna keep it a secret. And what am I meant to do about this exactly? Excuse me? One great example are the areas that revolve around a grab. Towards the end, there's this room with a giant saw blade which can only be avoided by grabbing the flying enemies and the poles on the outside. However, the big twist is you actually need to kill all of these flying enemies in order to progress, so the challenge comes from avoiding the saw blades and getting kills with the limited air combat at the exact same time. This part is great, it tests the skills you've used a million times already in this game, but puts it in such a way it feels unique and actually surprising. But sadly, for every cool section like this, there's also a bunch of slop. This level loves to use these small pipes which are incredibly hard to platform between because these numbnuts didn't ensure that the drop shadow was always visible. Then to add even more salt to this gaping wound, the camera in these sections decides to have a fight with you, so it makes these even more frustrating. It's just so annoying because this level has so many cool places, and then you have this, and then on top of that the combat here is fucking horrible. Listen, I know why they did it and it makes sense thematically, but the combat variety in this stage has been stripped down to basically nothing. Minus the room at the end and the room with the saw blade, everything you fight in this level is an egg robot. And remember what I said before, these guys are quite tanky. At the very least, it lets you test all of these late game combos, but at the same time it makes things take way too long. The combat and the tightroping sections are the prime reason this stage reaches the 30-minute mark. And once again, I know it suits the theme of the level, but I really wonder why they removed all of the other enemy types. And then what makes it worse is when you finally reach the end and other things start showing up, you're forced into fighting 2 drunk cavemen in a row. 2! Your reward for getting through this long ass stage is 2 of the least fun encounters of all time. It really is the nail in the coffin, man. But all negativity aside, I do really enjoy Eggmanland as a whole. It's a great challenge and is the highest peak of difficulty across all of Sonic. Even if there are many areas that fall short, Unleashed makes up for it by finally introducing a good boss for the nighttime portion. Holy fucking shit, about time, man. It only took 8 stages, 3 bosses and a 30-minute hellhole, but we finally got a boss fight that actually feels like a boss fight. There's a reason the Egg Dragoon has been rehashed a million times. It's got a badass set piece, a badass theme song, and a badass introduction in the cutscene before. Eggman breaks the ground apart below our heroes, which leads to Sonic doing shit I wish we could do in the actual game. He then yaps for a bit, and boom, it's you versus this giant beast of a machine while falling rapidly to the Earth's core. Defeating this thing requires dodging its various attacks until it eventually leaves itself open, which you can see thanks to these giant glowing green spots. During its downtime, you're free to wail away, which is great because it's not centered around a stupid gimmick. There's no grabbing random shit or slow pushing of a big ass block. It's you, your fists, and all of the combos you spent time learning, and something actually fun to test them all out against. During the later phases, we go deeper and deeper with more attacks introduced. In fact, the stakes get so intense, Sonic says,
Jeez, Eggman, simmer down!
You know how crazy you gotta be at this point for Sonic to tell you to simmer down? As I said, the attacks get a lot crazier. They range from freezing the entire platform to spawning a bunch of egg robots to jump you. Neither of these are very hard to deal with, but at the very least I'm having fun. I'm enjoying myself in a Sonic Unleashed nighttime boss, I can't believe it. It also ends with the best QuickTime event in the entire game, where Sonic uses a combination of feral leaps and right hooks to trick Eggman into attacking himself before launching him into the abyss. Oh no, he's back. Oh wait, nope, rest in peace. Of course it wouldn't be a Sonic game in this era if Eggman wasn't betrayed by whatever creature he was trying to control. It's finally time for us to face Dark Gaia, and what a great setup and entrance this thing has thanks to the returning CGI. It's up to Sonic, wait, nope, he's out of commission, and yeah, never mind, we're finished. The stakes are at the highest they've ever been, and for us to even stand a chance, we need this dude to do something!
What's happening? Oh, wow, that's just incredible. The temple!
Awaken and gather here to me!
That's right, Chip finally awakens his latent power and reforms all of the Gaia temples into one giant megastructure with the goal of taking Dark Gaia down. This showdown is a visual masterpiece that really reminds you you're fighting for the fate of the world. Too bad the fight is complete dog shit. Okay, not complete, but damn I wanted to be positive so bad, but whenever I get to this first phase I just want to kill myself. Here we pilot Chip's Gaia abomination and have to get close enough to damage Dark Gaia. One problem though, we control terribly. Getting this guy to turn makes me feel like Sisyphus. It's like they combined a tank with a tungsten cube and you've got the turning power of a beat up car from the 1920s. The turning is meant to be used to avoid the attacks thrown out, but if that doesn't work you can also punch and guard at the same snail's pace. You might be thinking, okay, well, duh. Of course the being made out of 1,000,000 tons of brick isn't gonna be fast. Well, sure, that's completely fine. The issue is, and sorry if I sound familiar, but just like Guess Who, this thing feels way too sluggish. Once you finally fight your way to the end, a quick time sequence will start, except this time things go horribly wrong, resulting with Chip getting gripped. What? To free him, it's up to Sonic, and he's responsible for the only redeemable and fun parts of this entire fight. The running phases are so good, man. It's one big test to see if you're fast enough to reach the end before the harsh time limit runs out. During these, the music shifts to a more intense piece, with Chip also begging you to hurry, Sonic! Which just makes your adrenaline spike to a level that no other place in this game does. This is it, yours and Chip's life on the line, everything banks on you, and if you fail, everything including the world as you know it is over. I love it. The environment combined with the level design makes these segments really memorable and save this boss fight from being complete and utter garbage. After repeating both of these sections a couple times, Dark Gaia is defeated. Or is he? Dun dun dun! In both the most grisly and disgusting visuals I've ever seen. Seriously, how was this allowed in a kid's game? Dark Gaia proceeds to open its eyes and slowly transform into its ultimate form. The perfect Dark Gaia has awakened and is spreading itself across the globe again. Things are looking pretty bleak, but Sonic's about to remember he's the main character.
Let's do it! All right, Chip, time for the big finish!
This music's about to make me finish. God damn, this slaps. The soundtrack and the visuals do a legendary job of saving the fight, because just like the last, the gameplay is just okay. At least the build up is great. It starts as kind of a 3D Doomsday Zone, which involves gathering rings to build up Sonic's health while getting closer and closer to Dark Gaia's barrier. Upon reaching it, Chip uses all of his power to breach through, leaving Sonic alone outside to deal with the force field. The payoff is really mediocre. The actual battle is just ramming headfirst into these nasty tentacles over and over with a very small minimal amount of dodging in between. After about 6 or 7 minutes, all of the tentacles are dealt with, which you'd think would open up more fight, but nope, it's just another quick time sequence. Like everything else in this fight, it looks cool, and I really love the ending where Sonic rams himself through the final eye in the middle, but it could have been a lot better for a final boss. It nails the music, it nails the spectacle, I love the dialogue in between, but in terms of gameplay, it's just kinda dull, and it's really disappointing. At the very least, the ending is pretty good, and dare I say it's emotional and pretty well written. This long ass fight drains Sonic of all of his energy, and just as it looks like his lifeless body is about to fall to its demise, Chip comes in and rescues our boy from becoming a faint memory. Using that same weird green energy from before, Chip launches Sonic back to the surface and out of harm's way before resealing the earth and purging Dark Gaia from existence. After that show of power, all that remains of Chip is his fading body, some amazing lines,
I'll never forget you. I'll be here by you, always. A part of the earth you tread.
and this bracelet to remember him by that also never shows up again. Farewell Chip, you will be missed. I still think I'm the only person in the world that actually likes him as a character. Sonic runs off with his new drip equipped, and with the company of Tails and one of the best Sonic openings, the end credits roll and Unleashed finally comes to a close. Actually, I lied, it doesn't. We still got a little bit more to talk about, and it's all that extra content I was glazing about 30 minutes ago. Let's start off with the side missions. Over in every hub world, there's this we can't speak English. Over in every hub world, there's this hot dog vendor who offers a bunch of challenges in turn for rewards. The challenges themselves aren't anything to write home about. In fact, I think they get a bit stupid after a while. At least they're not Ubisoft tier by spamming fetch quests over and over, but they all boil down to playing stages again with an arbitrary quest on top. Time trial level 1, play Windmill Act 2 again. Time trial level 2, play Windmill Act 2 again, but with even less time to spare. You see the issue here, yeah, the day stages are fun, but that kind of wears off when I gotta play the same one back to back with no variation or changes between them. I thought this problem would be solved with the enemy side missions, but nope. These will set a bounty throughout the level, but the kicker is the level doesn't end once that bounty is met. Instead, you still have to finish the stage, and yes, that applies to the night ones as well. I can't even describe how much of a stupid decision this is. Why would I want to play 20-minute stages over and over just for a measly hot dog at the end? Why not make it so that these only take place in certain fragments of a level with harsher enemies? That way, with just a tiny bit more effort, you would have a more unique challenge rather than going over and over and doing the same shit. It's lousy, it's annoying, and the only reason I'm gonna let this slide because it truly is completely optional. Thankfully, the side missions improve with the NPC quests. Some NPCs in the hub worlds will initiate mini challenges that actually have some variety to them. I remember there's this one with a missing kid that somehow managed to scale all the way up the Big Ben who we needed to recover by climbing up ourselves. The mission wasn't jaw-dropping, but it at least had different level design and didn't last the full length of a night stage. Another mission starter is the camera. As Kobadamono456 so gracefully said, some people have purple sperm above them, and taking pictures above them removes this dark energy, kinda like the movie Get Out. After taking a picture of them, you're thrown into a combat encounter, and I love that these actually take place in the streets and alleyways of the hub worlds themselves. It's nothing insane, but I'm glad they didn't just reuse the night stages. It's nice to go through something with a different environment. On a more positive note, the extra stages in the base game are really fun. As I mentioned ages ago, the hubs expand and open up several bonus stages that also manage to be structurally different from the main ones. They're not just another day or night stage, they're instead like B-sides that will take one mechanic, gimmick or section and then base a whole level on it. For example, there's a stage all about rail grinding, one that's all about drifting, and one that's all about quick stepping. They take these simple mechanics and base a whole level on them, which leads to some of the most creative level design because they're so limited. But if you're looking for pure difficulty, that's where the DLC stages come in. They have different types between them, but the one thing that binds them together is they love kicking your ass. DLC stage type 1 is base game stage but harder. These will take the layouts of the normal stages and crank up the difficulty by a stellar amount. One thing I will say is they start off really unique but start to decline as you go further and further. They don't become bad or anything like that, but here's Windmill Isle Act 1. You make your way through a difficult bridge section and then you're thrown above sea to look down on where you just ran through. Then the stage flings you into the background and onto the mountain terrain just to be shot up back into the sky and then back to the same bridge from the start and to the end of the stage. And then here's Windmill Isle Act 2. It's the same level but with spikes everywhere. Don't get me wrong, these are still well placed spikes. The level design doesn't fall off, but the variation does, if that makes any sense. The second type of DLC stage is just making a brand new level as a whole. I'm not going to go over all of them, but they're on the same level as the base game, so it's all good here. The night levels are still evil. You know that clip I've been using a million times? That's from one of these DLC disasters. This stage is a huge gauntlet of enemy encounters, ending with a drunk caveman that's apparently invincible. I mean, just look at this. This was after Adabat Night. This is end game damage. They went too far with increasing their health and it just makes the fights feel jarringly long instead of hard or actually challenging. However, examples like this are very few and far between. The DLC levels are overall a great addition and are much better than those damn side missions. And I think that's everything I gotta say about Sonic Unleashed. I know I've been very critical, but all of this negativity is from a place of love. I love this game so much. It was the game I always dreamed of playing since I was a kid, and when I finally got a console years later, let's just say I didn't put this game down for the entire day it was gifted to me. I love the detail and effort put into everything here, and even if it falls short in a lot of areas, it's still very, very special to me. That being said, it's a masterpiece in my heart, but objectively it's like a 6.5 maximum. Actually, wait, no, I forgot. I gotta thank the developers of Unleashed Recompiled. I know, I'm late as hell, but you guys managed to restore one of the most sacred games of the 7th generation. Thanks to all of you, people can finally enjoy this game and form their own opinion, so you all managed to make many people's dream come true. Okay, now we can roll the outro.